7 years. 7 years of practice. That's what I walked into rehearsal with. 7 years of slowly built up confidence. And in 2 minutes, my reality shattered. In August, I joined the talents program of the Jazz Academy. So it was my first time playing in a small jazz band. And that day, in 2025, I had practiced almost every single day. During the holidays, I had also nailed a concert, which further fed my confidence. So that day, I walked in like I was the main character. And I remember we started playing, and suddenly it was my turn to solo. But while I was playing, that's when it hit me. I realized the level the other musicians were at. Their accuracy, control, speed, creativity were things I could only dream of. My hands were shaking more than usual. I remember looking down at my horn, hoping no one had heard me. But that day, I wasn't tired. I wasn't underprepared. I was exposed, and I wanted to disappear. But this moment forced me to confront myself. Where had those 7 years disappeared? And the uncomfortable answer was this: I hadn't practiced to improve. I had practiced to make myself feel good, to boost my ego. But that day, I learned something very important. I learned that spending more time learning a skill didn't automatically lead to big improvements. I also realized that this was about a much bigger picture. It applies to anything you can spend time on feeling productive without actually achieving anything. Because most of us confuse effort with progress. We assume that more is always better. But my experience taught me otherwise. And this led me to a very important conclusion. Most of us aren't bad at learning. We're simply bad at practicing. If practice feels good all the time, that's because it's not challenging the part of you that needs to change. Practice is supposed to expose your weaknesses. But as soon as practice becomes uncomfortable, most of us instinctively avoid it. And I, of course, was no exception. In my case, the biggest change started with one uncomfortable habit. I started to record my practice sessions, and oh my God, it was embarrassing. As an example, we all know what it feels like to listen to your own voice recordings. I hate doing that. But for the very first time, I couldn't ignore my weaknesses. Because something very interesting happens when you perform. Your brain fills in the gaps with what you were meant to do, not with what you actually did. But the recording didn't care about my emotions. It simply reflected the truth. And that's what effective practice should look like. It should create feedback you can't argue with. It should confront your ego instead of protecting it. But facing your weaknesses is only half the battle. To actually improve, you have to surround yourself with higher standards. It's the fastest way to teach your brain what great looks like. And that's where immersion comes in. Immersion means surrounding yourself with people who excel at the skill you're trying to learn. And I applied this outside of music too. I switched rowing clubs to be able to train with stronger athletes. And this was the most terrifying decision of my life. I mean, I went from being the best in the club literally to your average lambda rower. So that was a big bummer. But now looking back, I can tell that the higher standards forced me to improve faster than ever. It felt uncomfortable at first. I realized how far behind I was, but that's exactly the point. Because feedback is great, it shows you what's wrong. But immersion shows you what's possible. It shows you your potential. And this applies to anything you can think of. Let it be any type of sports, for example, curling, or languages, or philosophy, or schoolwork, or even life itself. We don't fail because we lack talent. We fail because we practice comfortably instead of intentionally. because we protect our ego instead of confronting it, and because we stay in environments that don't force us to grow. Comfort builds confidence. Discomfort creates growth. It's your choice. Thank you.